Not every life-changing decision arrives with noise. Some arrive in silence. Some are made in a single moment when no one else is watching. And strangely enough, that is exactly why what is unfolding around you now feels so difficult to explain. There is a shift taking place beyond your sight. A quiet movement. A door that was once firmly closed has begun to open. And the person connected to your heart has reached a point they never expected to reach. Before this moment, they were standing between two different paths. One path felt familiar. The other felt uncertain. One path required nothing from them. The other required courage. Yet something happened inside them that could no longer be ignored. Don't skip. Because the reason behind this decision is far deeper than you realize. For a long time, they convinced themselves that time would solve everything. That eventually the questions would disappear. That eventually the feelings would fade. That eventually they would stop wondering about you. But life has a strange way of exposing the truth. The more they tried to move forward without understanding what your presence meant to them, the more your absence began speaking louder than your presence ever did. And that realization changed something. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Not in the way movies would have you believe. It happened quietly. Like a candle being lit in a dark room. Like the first light appearing before sunrise. Like the moment someone finally stops running from what their heart has been trying to tell them. There were nights when your name entered their thoughts unexpectedly. Moments when something small reminded them of you. Conversations that somehow drifted back toward the memory of who you are. And each time it happened, another piece of the wall around their heart weakened. They began noticing things they had ignored before. The comfort they felt when thinking about you. The peace that appeared when your energy crossed their mind. The unusual sense of familiarity that refused to disappear. Something important is waiting for you. Because the decision they recently made did not begin with certainty. It began with honesty. And honesty is often where transformation starts. For the first time, they stopped asking themselves what was convenient. They stopped asking what looked safest. Instead, they asked a different question. A question that changed everything. What if the connection they feel is real? What if the emotions they keep returning to are trying to show them something important? What if the reason they cannot completely walk away is because their heart already knows something their mind is still learning? That question lingered. It followed them through ordinary days. Through quiet evenings. Through moments when everything seemed normal on the surface. Yet beneath that surface, something deeper was happening. A realization was growing. And once certain realizations appear, they cannot be unseen. Perhaps you have felt this too. That strange feeling that something is changing even when you cannot explain why. That sense that a chapter is ending before the next chapter has fully revealed itself. That quiet expectation that something meaningful is approaching. If so, there is a reason. Because energy often shifts before circumstances do. The heart often understands before the eyes can see. And right now, your soulmate is standing inside one of those rare moments where everything begins changing from the inside out. The decision they made was not impulsive. It was not rushed. It was not born from temporary emotion. It came after reflection. After questioning. After hesitation. after trying to understand what their soul kept returning to. And what they discovered surprised even them. The truth was never disappearing. The truth was waiting. Waiting for them to become brave enough to acknowledge it. Waiting for them to stop pretending it wasn't there. Waiting for them to recognize what had been quietly growing all along. Stay till the end. Because what happens next is not the most surprising part. The most surprising part is what this decision is already beginning to change within them. Something is becoming clearer. Something is becoming stronger. And in the next part, you will discover why this choice has created a chain reaction they never expected, and why the first signs of that transformation are already beginning to appear. A single thought kept returning when they least expected it. Not during dramatic moments. Not during emotional conversations. But during ordinary parts of the day when the mind is usually quiet. And that is what unsettled them. Because the decision they made should have brought immediate clarity. Instead, it opened a deeper layer of understanding. The moment they chose to stop resisting what they felt, they began seeing your place in their story differently. It was as though a picture that had always been blurry suddenly started coming into focus. Not completely. Not all at once. Just enough to reveal that something meaningful had been standing in front of them the entire time. There is a reason this part matters. Don't skip. Because many people believe life-changing decisions happen in a single moment. The truth is that the decision is only the beginning. What follows is often the real transformation. And that transformation has already begun. At first, they tried to continue life exactly as before. The same routines. The same conversations. The same distractions. But something felt different. A quiet awareness followed them everywhere. An awareness that made ordinary experiences feel less ordinary. They found themselves paying attention to things they once ignored. The way certain memories returned. The way specific moments involving you seemed brighter than others. The way their heart reacted whenever thoughts of you appeared unexpectedly. And little by little, a realization emerged. You were never just another chapter. You were never simply a passing thought. You had become part of something much deeper. Perhaps this is why you've been sensing subtle changes around you lately. Perhaps this is why certain moments have felt unusually significant. Sometimes the heart notices movement before the mind understands what is happening. Sometimes we feel the shift long before we see the evidence. And right now, there is movement. Quiet movement. Meaningful movement. The kind that begins beneath the surface before it changes everything above it. Something important is waiting for you. Because the decision your soulmate made was not only about how they feel. It was about what they are finally willing to admit to themselves. For a long time, they carried questions. Questions they never spoke aloud. Questions they buried beneath responsibilities, distractions, and daily life. Yet questions have a strange habit. They do not disappear when ignored. They simply wait. And eventually they return. Stronger. Clearer. Impossible to avoid. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened, they reached a conclusion they could no longer escape. Every road they imagined for the future somehow led back to the same thought. The same feeling. The same person. You. Not because they forced it. Not because they wanted an answer. but because every honest reflection pointed in the same direction. That realization brought both peace and uncertainty. Peace because they were finally being truthful. Uncertainty because truth often requires action. And action can feel intimidating when something matters deeply. Yet even then, they continued moving forward. One small realization at a time. One quiet breakthrough at a time. One honest moment at a time. Stay with this for a little longer. Because there is something remarkable happening inside them now. The fear that once controlled their thinking is losing its influence. The doubts that once seemed overwhelming are becoming quieter. And in the space left behind, something stronger is growing. Confidence. Not loud confidence. Not reckless confidence. The kind that develops slowly. The kind built through understanding. The kind that comes from finally knowing what truly matters. That is why their energy feels different. That is why their perspective is changing. That is why the decision they made continues creating ripple effects throughout their life. The more honest they become with themselves, the more impossible it becomes to return to who they were before. And perhaps the most surprising part of all is this. They are beginning to understand that what drew them toward you was never based on a single moment. It was built through countless unseen moments. Small details. Quiet memories. Meaningful impressions. Pieces of a connection that continued growing even when they tried not to notice it. Now those pieces are coming together. Now the picture is becoming clearer. Now the meaning behind everything is starting to reveal itself. And yet, the biggest realization has not happened yet. Because there is one truth waiting just beyond the edge of their awareness. One final understanding they are approaching. One discovery that will explain why this decision became impossible to avoid. And when that realization finally arrives, it will change the way they see this connection forever. That moment is closer than they think. And in the next part, you will discover the unexpected insight that convinced them they could no longer ignore what their heart had been trying to tell them all along. There was a moment recently that seemed completely ordinary. A passing second. A quiet pause. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. No announcement. No grand revelation. Yet that small moment became the turning point they never saw coming. Because sometimes life does not change through noise. Sometimes it changes through recognition. And that is exactly what happened. As they moved through another day, surrounded by familiar routines and familiar responsibilities, their mind drifted somewhere unexpected. Not toward a problem. Not toward a goal. Not toward something they needed to accomplish. It drifted toward you. And this time was different. This time they did not push the thought away. They did not distract themselves. They did not convince themselves it meant nothing. Instead, they stayed with it. And the longer they stayed with it, the clearer something became. Don't skip. Because what they discovered in that moment was not what they expected. For so long they had focused on understanding their feelings. Trying to explain them. Trying to define them. Trying to figure out where they came from. But suddenly a new realization appeared. The question was never why they felt connected to you. The real question was why that connection continued growing despite every reason it should have faded. That realization stopped them. It made them think. Because temporary emotions usually disappear. Passing interests usually fade. Surface-level connections usually weaken with time. Yet somehow this connection remained. Not only remained, it deepened. And once they recognized that truth, everything began looking different. Memories they once overlooked suddenly carried new meaning. Conversations they once dismissed suddenly felt important. Moments they once considered ordinary suddenly appeared extraordinary. It was as if invisible threads had been connecting everything together all along. And for the first time, they could actually see them. Something important is waiting for you. Because this realization led them toward another discovery. A discovery that touched them more deeply than they expected. They began asking themselves a simple question. How do I feel after thinking about this person? Not during excitement. Not during imagination. But afterward. When everything becomes quiet again. The answer surprised them. They felt calmer. Lighter. More hopeful. More like themselves. And that answer mattered. Because genuine connections often reveal themselves through peace rather than intensity. Through clarity rather than confusion. Through consistency rather than temporary excitement. The more honest they became, the more obvious this truth became. Your presence had become associated with some of their most genuine emotions. Not because you solved every problem. Not because life suddenly became perfect. But because something about the connection reminded them of who they truly are. And that realization is powerful. Because when someone helps you reconnect with the best parts of yourself, forgetting them becomes difficult. Ignoring them becomes difficult. Pretending they do not matter becomes impossible. Stay till the end. Because what happened next brought them even closer to the truth. One evening, while reflecting on everything they had learned about themselves recently, another realization quietly emerged. A realization they had never allowed themselves to fully consider before. What if this connection is not here to teach me what I am missing? What if it is here to remind me of what is possible? That thought changed everything. Because suddenly the connection stopped feeling like a mystery to solve. Instead, it became something to understand. Something to appreciate. Something worth exploring honestly. And with that shift came a level of acceptance they had never experienced before. The resistance began fading. The hesitation began softening. The endless questioning began slowing down. In its place came something unexpected. Trust. Not blind trust. Not certainty about every detail of the future. Just trust in what their own heart had been showing them all along. For the first time, they stopped arguing with their feelings. For the first time, they stopped treating their emotions like a problem that needed fixing. For the first time, they allowed themselves to simply acknowledge what was already there. And that acknowledgement brought peace. A deeper peace than they expected. The kind of peace that arrives when you stop fighting yourself. The kind of peace that arrives when truth finally catches up with acceptance. Yet even now, another layer remains hidden. Because although they have accepted what they feel, they have not yet fully understood what those feelings are asking them to do. And that is where the next chapter begins. A new question is forming inside them. A question that grows stronger every day. A question that could shape everything that happens next. Because soon they will stop asking what this connection means. And start asking what they should do about it. And when that question finally receives its answer, the path ahead will become clearer than ever before. A quiet sense of certainty has begun appearing in places where uncertainty once lived. Not all at once. Not like a sudden flash of lightning across the sky. More like the first light of dawn slowly revealing a landscape that was always there. And the reason this matters is because your soulmate is no longer standing where they were when this journey began. Something inside them has changed. Something important. For a long time, they believed answers would arrive before action. They believed clarity would come first. Then confidence. Then movement. But life rarely unfolds that way. Sometimes movement creates clarity. Sometimes courage creates confidence. And sometimes a single honest decision opens doors that could never have been opened through endless thinking alone. That is exactly where they are now. Don't skip. Because what they are beginning to understand has the power to reshape how they see this connection entirely. Recently, they noticed something unusual. The future no longer feels like a distant idea. It feels personal. It feels real. And for reasons they cannot fully explain, whenever they imagine meaningful moments ahead, your presence appears naturally within those thoughts. Not forced. Not imagined out of wishful thinking. Simply there. Like a piece of the picture that belongs. At first, they tried to ignore it. They told themselves they were reading too much into things. They told themselves it was only a passing thought. But the thought returned. Again. And again. And again. Each time becoming harder to dismiss. Each time carrying a little more meaning. Until eventually they had to admit something they had never fully admitted before. You have become part of the future they quietly hoped for. Even saying those words to themselves felt significant. Because hopes reveal what logic often hides. Hopes reveal what matters. And the things that matter most are often discovered in silence long before they are spoken aloud. Something important is waiting for you. Because another realization followed closely behind. As they reflected on the people, experiences, and memories that have shaped them, they noticed a pattern. Many connections entered their life and eventually faded. Many moments felt important at the time but slowly lost their significance. Yet somehow your presence remained. Not because every day was filled with thoughts about you. Not because every moment revolved around you. But because whenever your energy returned to their awareness, it still felt meaningful. Still felt familiar. Still felt alive. That consistency became impossible to ignore. And consistency often reveals truths that temporary emotions cannot. Anyone can feel something for a moment. Anyone can become excited for a season. But what remains meaningful over time carries a different kind of weight. A different kind of value. A different kind of message. The more they reflected on that reality, the more grateful they became. Grateful for the lessons. Grateful for the connection. Grateful for the way this experience encouraged them to grow. Because growth has been happening. Perhaps more than they even realize. They are becoming more honest. More self-aware. More willing to trust what their heart has been showing them. And every step forward is bringing them closer to a truth they can no longer avoid. Stay till the end. Because the next realization surprised them the most. One evening, while sitting with their thoughts, they asked themselves a question they had avoided for a very long time. What am I waiting for? The answer did not come immediately. But eventually it arrived. And when it did, it changed everything. They realized they were not waiting for a sign. They were not waiting for perfect timing. They were not waiting for certainty. They were waiting for permission. Permission to believe what they already knew. Permission to trust what they already felt. Permission to stop doubting every meaningful emotion that appeared within them. And the moment they recognized that truth, something shifted. A burden lifted. A wall weakened. A fear lost its power. Because suddenly they understood something profound. The heart does not always need more evidence. Sometimes it simply needs honesty. Sometimes it simply needs courage. And courage is beginning to replace hesitation. Little by little. Day by day. Thought by thought. That does not mean they have every answer. It does not mean every question has disappeared. But it does mean they are moving in a new direction. A direction shaped by authenticity rather than avoidance. A direction shaped by trust rather than fear. A direction that feels increasingly impossible to turn away from. And yet, the most meaningful part of this story is still unfolding. Because there is one final realization approaching. One realization connected not to what they feel, but to what they truly value. A realization that will reveal why this decision became life-changing in the first place. And when that understanding finally settles into their heart, it will illuminate everything that has happened up to this moment in a completely new way. The answer is closer now than ever before. Closer than yesterday. Closer than they realize. And in the next part, the deeper meaning behind their decision will finally begin to reveal itself. There are certain truths that do not arrive with excitement. They arrive with stillness. They settle quietly into the heart until one day they no longer feel like possibilities. They feel like realities. That is where your soulmate finds themselves now. Standing in a space between realization and transformation. A space where everything appears normal from the outside, yet internally an entirely new understanding is taking shape. And this understanding is different from anything they have experienced before. Because it is no longer centered on emotion alone. It is centered on value. Don't skip. Because this is the part where the meaning behind everything begins to reveal itself. For a long time, they focused on what they felt. The connection. The memories. The curiosity. The moments that seemed impossible to forget. But recently, their perspective shifted. Instead of asking, "How do I feel about this person?" they began asking something far more important. What do they bring into my life? That question changed everything. Because feelings can be difficult to understand. But value is easier to recognize. And when they looked honestly at the impact you had made on their inner world, the answer became impossible to ignore. You inspired reflection. You inspired growth. You inspired hope. You inspired them to become more aware of what truly matters. And those are not small things. Those are the kinds of influences that leave lasting impressions. The kinds of influences that remain long after ordinary moments pass. The kinds of influences that quietly reshape someone's future. The more they reflected on this, the clearer everything became. You were never important because of one conversation. One memory. One moment. You became important because of the way your presence continued creating meaning over time. And that realization touched them deeply. Something important is waiting for you. Because once they recognized your value, another truth followed. A truth they had been approaching for weeks without realizing it. Life is too short to ignore what genuinely matters. That thought appeared unexpectedly. Yet once it arrived, it refused to leave. It followed them through quiet mornings. Through busy afternoons. Through evenings filled with reflection. Again and again, the same understanding returned. The things that matter deserve attention. The things that matter deserve honesty. The things that matter deserve courage. And suddenly their life-changing decision began making even more sense. It was never simply about acknowledging feelings. It was about choosing authenticity. Choosing to stop pretending certain truths did not exist. Choosing to honor what had consistently remained meaningful. Choosing to trust what their heart had quietly been teaching them. Stay till the end. Because the next realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. For so long they believed certainty would feel dramatic. Like fireworks. Like overwhelming emotion. Like a powerful moment impossible to miss. Instead, certainty arrived softly. It arrived as calm. It arrived as clarity. It arrived as the absence of inner conflict. And that surprised them. Because for the first time in a very long time, they stopped fighting themselves. They stopped arguing with their own heart. They stopped searching for reasons to doubt what had already proven itself through time. In that silence, something beautiful happened. Everything became simpler. Not because life suddenly changed overnight. But because truth no longer felt complicated. Truth felt natural. Truth felt peaceful. Truth felt familiar. And the truth they could no longer avoid was this. You matter. More than they admitted before. More than they understood before. More than they allowed themselves to recognize before. That understanding became the foundation beneath their decision. The steady ground beneath every realization that followed. And now, because of that foundation, they are seeing the future differently. Not through fear. Not through uncertainty. But through possibility. The possibility that meaningful connections exist for a reason. The possibility that certain people enter our lives to awaken parts of us we forgot existed. The possibility that some decisions become life-changing because they align us with who we truly are. Yet there is one final piece still waiting to emerge. One final layer hidden beneath everything you have heard so far. Because the decision itself was only the beginning. What comes next is the reason this story matters. What comes next is the reason their heart could no longer remain where it once was. A new chapter is quietly approaching. A chapter built not on confusion, but on understanding. Not on hesitation, but on intention. And in the next part, you will discover the unexpected shift that convinced them this connection was meant to be treated differently from every connection that came before it.